To disastrous history. Today, we're going to talk about some very prominent tornado myths that have been around for, well, about as long as I can remember. So, without further ado, let's get started. So, the first one is a big one that comes up on a regular basis and is argued about constantly. This is the sheltering in an overpass myth. So, there's one big example that always gets pointed to as an example of why you should not shelter in an overpass, because you should not shelter in an overpass if a tornado is coming at you. There's a couple reasons. Number one, many overpasses are raised up. So when you get up underneath that overpass, you are putting yourself higher up in the tornado, which has higher winds. The higher in a tornado you go, the higher the winds there are. It also exposes you to more of the debris that is flying around in the tornado. Now, this picture you see here on the screen, this is from the 1999 Moore F5 tornado. There were approximately a dozen people that sheltered underneath this particular overpass. The outline you see here, so all of this brown is mud that was picked up and plastered on there by the tornado. All of this white area you see right here, except for this over here, this white area you see under here is where people were that sheltered under this overpass. Now, 11 of the 12 people that sheltered under this overpass survived. There was one woman who was pulled out by the tornado and died. But everyone that sheltered under this overpass had extremely critical, most of the time lifelong injuries. They were impaled by numerous pieces of debris. They were broken, bloody, and battered. They did survive, but many of them had very serious injuries. In fact, during that 1999 Moore F5 tornado, there were three different locations where people sheltered under overpasses. This was the most. This one had 12 people and one person died. There was another one where there was one guy that sheltered under the overpass from an EF2 tornado. He died in that one. And then there was another overpass where one person sheltered and they were pulled out and died in that overpass as well. Part of it is that as the tornado moves over the overpass, the air constricts a bit and speeds up as it's going through, in addition to the debris that's flying through the air hitting you. So if you see a tornado coming at you and you're in your car, you need to get out of your car, first of all, and you need to head to the nearest ditch or the lowest point you can find. Get as flat as you possibly can in the ditch itself so that the winds cannot get underneath your body and pick you up, because tornadoes, I guess technically another myth is that tornadoes don't suck. It's more of the pulling up motion is winds blowing upward. It's not pulling you up, it's pushing you up from underneath. So if you are flat on the ground, underneath it, down in a ditch, as the tornado goes over you, it's going to blow the wind over you. But as long as it can't get underneath you, as long as you can keep yourself flat, you're going to miss most of the debris flying over you, because the debris then has to go down into the ditch and hit you. It also can't get underneath you and pull you up. So that's why you pick a ditch over an overpass. Overpasses, there is plenty of surface area of your body, because you're crouched up here in these overpass areas that you cannot get out of. So that is overpass myth. Basically, go to a ditch, avoid the overpass, period, end of. You can survive in an overpass. I would not recommend it. It will be violent. It feels like it should be safe. It is not. It is arguably one of the worst places you can go. Our next myth is that tornadoes never strike the same place twice. Now, this is a very common myth. It's been more or less talked about pretty regularly, but we're going to move to our next one, and we're just going to use Moore, Oklahoma as an example. These are all of the tornadoes that have hit Moore in the last 100 or so years. There have been a lot. You can see one particular area north of Moore has been very unlucky. Let's see. This is a EF0 in 1965, 1960, 1973, 1973. Now, these aren't the exact paths, but it's a general idea of where these particular tornadoes went, because obviously tornadoes don't have perfectly straight paths, as you can see from this tornado that's just on the other side of the city limits as it traveled northward. We have a general line, but it's usually pretty wavy. But you get the general picture, is that tornadoes absolutely can hit the same place twice. In fact, if we go to our next screen here, this is the F4 in Moore in 2011. the EF4 tornado in Moore in 2011. This is the EF5 tornado in Moore in 2011. Or 2013, I'm sorry, not 2011, 2013. You can see the track here, and they overlapped ever so briefly. Let's turn off our polygons. They overlapped right in this area, just south of Southwest 149th Street and Portland Avenue. They overlapped ever so slightly in a similar area. So tornadoes absolutely can't hit the same place twice. In fact, Tanner, Alabama, in 1974, during the super outbreak in 1974, was hit by an F5 tornado on the north side of town. And then approximately 30 minutes later was hit by a second F5 tornado on the south side of town. Some of the areas got hit by the same tornado ever so slightly with the outer edges of the tornadoes, but it caused significant damage in Tanner. In addition, in Gainesville, Georgia, in 1936, there were two tornadoes that touched down on either side of town, and they merged together in the middle of town. So kind of hit by two tornadoes, depending on what your definition is. But tornadoes absolutely can and do strike the same area twice. In Kansas, there is a town that was hit by three separate tornadoes on May 20th in 1916, 1917, and 1918. Same day, same city, same place, 3 years in a row. There is actually another myth that has floated around on the internet that a church in Arkansas, not Kansas, a church in Arkansas was hit by a tornado 3 separate times in the same day. I have hunted that one down pretty significantly, and it does not appear to be an actual thing. Just kind of one of those myths. But tornadoes absolutely can and do hit the same place twice. Our next myth is another one that gets repeated even to this day. These first two kind of have been debunked regularly and are regularly debunked. But this third one I still often get repeated during scrolling through social media. And that is that skyscrapers and tall buildings in general prevent tornadoes from forming. Now, this first photo is from Lubbock, Texas in 1970. This building was hit by the Lubbock, Texas tornado. It's one of the tornadoes that was initially rated as an F6 by Ted Fujita before being downgraded to an F5. But you can see the damage it did to the outside of this tornado. It also to this building. It also blew off some of the windows. There is a more recent example. Fort Worth in 2000 was hit by an F3 tornado that caused very significant damage to several high-rise buildings in downtown Fort Worth. And then recently, St. Louis was hit by a tornado. It didn't really go through downtown, depending on what your definition of downtown was, but none of the buildings there prevented it. The general idea is that somehow the high-rise buildings prevent the tornado from starting to spin and then touching down, and it is 100% false, like 100% false. Nashville has been hit by several tornadoes. Last year, Houston was hit by a derecho that had a couple tornadoes in it that one of them went through downtown. It was like an F0 or EF0. But tornadoes absolutely can and do hit skyscrapers, not on a regular basis, but they can and do. The reason that you don't have very many examples of skyscrapers such as this being hit by tornadoes is the general footprint of a skyscraper and a city in general is small. So when you think about how big the country is and how small a tornado is, it's a very small chance that a tornado forms and then also hits a skyscraper. It's kind of a numbers thing. But as we have a couple examples of tornadoes hitting high-rise buildings. Joplin St. John's Regional Medical Center is another example of a high-rise building that was hit by a tornado and was very significantly damaged. They had to tear it down. It caused so much damage. So tall buildings do not prevent tornadoes. Our next myth is that large lakes and rivers prevent tornadoes. This is also a very, very common one still to this day. That rivers, lakes, water in general prevents tornadoes from touching down and going over it. And this tornado This is an example recently of 2021. This is the 2021 Mayfield EF4 tornado. This was a long track tornado that killed several people. But the area I want to focus on is right here in this Kentucky Lake area. So as you can see, as this tornado went across Kentucky Lake, right before it went across, it was at EF4 strength, which you can see that damage here. This is EF4 strength. This home has been swept away. It was under construction, but based on NWS Paducah's rating, it said that most of it was built enough to receive that EF4 rating. You can see how strong this particular tornado was. We have debarking of trees in the background, debranching. These trees have not been deleafed because it was in December, so it was wintertime, so the leaves were already gone. But there was significant damage. You can even see it some in the background over here. You can see that this was at EF4 damage and EF3 damage. Now, it tracked across Kentucky Lake, went through this. Is this an island? No, it's a peninsula. Land between the lakes National Recreation Area. It's relatively low strength in this area, but there's nothing really for it to hit in this area other than trees. So you're already going to have a lower damage rating as it goes through this area because there's nothing here to give it a higher damage rating. They could have possibly given some of these trees a higher damage rating. We'll just look at this picture real quick. Yeah, they might have been able to give a couple of these a higher damage rating, like an EF3. And then as it goes back over the rest of the lake over here, it's still at EF3 strength as it comes back on shore. And you can see the damage here. The exterior walls of this home have been collapsed. Some of it's still standing, but as you can see, it was still at a very strong intensity as it came back over the lake. So essentially, there really isn't any truth to the idea that going over rivers or going over lakes or going over water in general does anything to weaken tornadoes. They can still be at the same strength, stronger or weaker. It just depends on the particular tornado. The water itself does nothing to weaken or strengthen the tornado, essentially. So that's it. Our next one, you may recognize this photo because I talk about this tornado at length, is Mountains Prevent Tornadoes. And there is some truth to the idea that changes in altitude can help stop tornadoes. Like extreme changes in altitude can stop tornadoes. Stop is a strong word. Weaken is a better word. There's different airflows over mountains and things like that. However, they still can happen on top of mountains. This particular tornado was in 1987 in Yellowstone and Teton National Forest. This is the only F4 tornado in Wyoming history. It's the only violent tornado in Wyoming history, and it is the only violent tornado to cross the Continental Divide. It downed about 1 million trees, and Ted Fujita himself went out and did the analysis of this damage path. It didn't hit any structure. It only hit trees, scared some campers to death because they were so high altitude and the mesocyclone was so low that there was likely no visible funnel. It was essentially just spinning in the actual mesocyclone. Still sounded like a tornado, still produced tornado damage path, but in that particular area, it did not have a funnel. Once it got past this high area, because it went through several valleys and up on mountainsides. So once it went down into the valley, it likely produced a funnel, and then that funnel went away or retracted as it went back up the mountain and then came back down, things like that. So there is some truth to the idea that higher altitude is going to produce less strong tornadoes simply because it generally doesn't have the instability. It generally doesn't have the moisture and all of that to produce those really strong tornadoes. But there is the possibility that it still could. And this one's a great example of it. Now, our next tornado myth is one that is much less common now, but it is still every once in a while comes up. So, in general, most tornadoes travel from the southwest to the northeast at a diagonal angle, right, in this general area. And there is an idea that if you go to the southwest corner of your home as the tornado spins counterclockwise, right? So here, let's just pull up a random house damage. Okay, we can kind of use this photo. All right, so we're gonna minimize me a little bit there. There we go. Okay, so looking at this photo, you have, I don't have a compass, so we're going to assume this back wall where this propane tank is north, this wall closest to us is south, to the left where this tree and this garage shelter, whatever this is west, and over here where this extension cord is east. There is an idea that if, as this tornado is moving from the southwest to the northeast, the tornado winds are going around this way. So you can see on this tree right here where it's broken, this would be the front portion of the wind. So if you're spinning like this counterclockwise, counterclockwise, had to think about a clock for a minute. If you're in that southwest corner, the winds are going to be pushing all of the debris away from you. And then when it comes back around, it will be past you and it'll be blowing into the northeast corner. The problem with that is that if you think about it for a little bit longer than just the initial thought, it doesn't really make sense, right? Because you can look at the damage to homes, and it's a time thing. As the winds move, it starts attacking whatever the first thing it gets to is, right? The first thing it gets to, if it's moving from the southwest to the northeast, is going to be that southwest corner. And it's not going to provide you protection. What you need is to be in the center and have as many walls between you and the outside as possible. Because, as I've said before, surviving a tornado is a race against time. Tornadoes have an infinite amount of power, but a finite time to use it. So, the more barriers you can put between you and those tornadic winds, the better chances you will be. Because a tornado, say, has 30 seconds to get to you. If it takes 15 seconds to go through the first wall, 15 seconds to go through the second wall, and then it has no time to go through the third wall, and you are safe, right? So you want to run out the clock. Putting yourself in a corner on the exterior of your home is not giving you any time to run out the clock. It's giving the tornado time to the easiest time possible to find you. So you want to find an interior house or interior room or a basement, because down in your basement, it's the same as a ditch. The winds have to go in. You might have some collapse from above on top of you from your home, if depending on the strength of the tornado, but it's going to take effort to get to you. It's going to take time because it's got to sweep away the top. Then it's got to start working in whatever ways it can to get the actual base of your house up, which is going to be difficult because there's no real access to the basement. So don't go to the southwest corner of your house. Go to the middle of your house or your basement. That will be your best bet. Now, our next tornadic myth is that it's not one that comes up a lot anymore, but it was very common in like the early 90s, late 90s, and early 2000s, is that before a tornado, you should open all of your windows in your home to equalize the pressure so that the tornado can move over your house and cause minimal damage, because it was believed by people that the damage was caused by the pressure outside trying to equalize to the inside, right? And that's not how it works. In fact, if you open your windows, you are providing the tornado easier access to the inside of your house, because tornadoes destroy things by pushing on surface areas. And the more surface area you create underneath, so if you open all your windows, it's going to be able to get the winds inside your house through your open windows and lift up on the bottom side of your floor or the bottom side of your roof or whatever it is. So opening your windows exposes you to, number one, more of your house potentially being destroyed, but also exposes you inside your house to more flying debris, because as the wind blows through, debris is going to fly through there. It's simply not effective. Like it's not going to give you any additional safety. It's not going to cause any less damage to your house. It's literally just going to give the tornado an easier chance to destroy your home. If you think about a tornado like a toddler, If you give them a hole and a way to get in, they're going to find it and they're going to destroy it. Whatever that is. Whatever it is, if there is a hole, they will find it, they will rip it apart. And that is essentially what a tornado does. Is it finds holes. It is a toddler that finds holes and rips it apart. So, in addition to that, if you see a tornado coming at you, you should immediately go to shelter. Taking the time to go through your house to open all your windows is a waste of time that you could have been using to get yourself, your family, your pets into a safe location to have a better chance to ride out the tornado. Yeah, that one's pretty much that. Our next myth is that the shape and the size of tornadoes determine strength. This is a very common one. Like there is a lot of people to this day that still say, "Oh, that was a giant wedge. It has to be an EF5. That was a really narrow tornado. It's likely EF0, EF1." That is not accurate. Case in point, this tornado you see on the screen right here. This is the only EF5 tornado in Canadian history. This is the Ely, Manitoba tornado. It picked up a house and tossed it. The entire house. Ripped it right up off the foundation, lifted it around the tornado a couple times, and tossed it to the side. This tornado was about 150 yards wide, which is not very wide. It's 450 feet. About a football field, a little more, football field and a half, if you want to get an idea. That is not very wide for a tornado. It is very narrow. But this tornado packed a punch. In addition to this tornado packing a punch, it also looped around several times and hit the same spot more than once. Speaking of tornado myths, that tornadoes never strike twice. Sometimes the same tornado hits the same spot twice. It's happened several times. It happened with this tornado. There was a Bennington, Kansas tornado that looped around and hit the same spot twice. And that particular Bennington, Kansas tornado was about a mile wide and ended up being rated an EF3. Now, that's partially because it really only hit open farmland and only a couple trees, but it was an EF3 tornado and was a mile wide. There are several indications of tornadoes that are half mile to mile wide that were EF3, EF2 that had significant width, but didn't have that strength that a lot of people like to associate with those really wide tornadoes. There's likely a little bit of a correlation between width and strength, but it's going to be thrown off by the wider a tornado is, the more it's going to hit, so the better chance it's going to hit something that can give it a stronger wind speed. But just because a tornado is extremely wide or extremely narrow does not mean that it is weak or strong. It could be both. It could be either. Either one just depends on the tornado. Our next myth is that there is an increasing number of tornadoes. And I don't know if myth is necessarily the right word for this. However, we have had an increased number of tornadoes year over year since we started recording tornadoes. And there are a multiple number of reasons for that. Number one is we are much better at finding them on radar. We have radars now to see them. So we can say, okay, this was a tornado. We know where this tornado was, and when it's out in the middle of nowhere, we can go look at the damage and say, yes, this was a tornado. We also have a higher population. And areas that were rural before are still kind of rural, but less rural, if that makes sense. So we have more eyes. We have more people that are observing these saying, yes, I saw a tornado at this place at this time on this date. And we have storm chasers now. Storm chasers go out and, for the most part, capture most tornadoes. So while it is possible that there has been an increase in tornadoes due to various reasons, it's also partially because we are reporting them better and able to capture them better. It will likely take a number of more years down the road to determine if there's actually been an increase in tornadoes in relation to things like climate change. Because we still don't fully understand exactly how tornadoes form. we don't quite know what the impact of climate change will be on tornadoes. And then the last one I want to talk about here is one that I see repeated a lot, and that is Tornado Alley is shifting east. And this is one of those things that many people will argue constantly. And I understand where they're coming from, but I think that it's a bit misled. So tornado production is kind of a year over year thing. So I have the damage assessment toolkit pulled up, and I have 3 separate years. I have 2023 to 2024, 2024 to 2025, and then 2025 so far. And if you look here on the damage assessment toolkit, you'll see that a lot of the tornadoes in 2023 were in, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, and then down south in Mississippi, Tennessee, Georgia, or Alabama, Georgia. There were a couple in Arkansas. Like, you can see that there's not a lot. There's some here in traditional Tornado Alley, which is Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, some Iowa, some South Dakota, some Missouri. This traditional Tornado Alley has a few tornadoes, but the vast majority of the bigger, the stronger, and the more numerous tornadoes is right here in the middle of the country, with a lot of them down here in the south. That's that year. We look at 2024. We zoom out here a little bit. You'll see a lot more tornadoes here in traditional Tornado Alley. So this is all of 2024. We'll see some over in this area and some weaker ones down here in Mississippi. But for the most part, a lot of our tornadoes last year were in this traditional Tornado Alley, especially Iowa. Iowa got hit a lot last year by tornadoes, and all of our violent tornadoes were in Tornado Alley last year. Those are the EF4s. We had one in Nebraska, one in Iowa, and then 2 in Oklahoma / I believe that, did that cross the border in Texas? We're going to zoom in. No, it was just in Oklahoma. All of our violent tornadoes were in traditional Tornado Alley last year, right? We have a little bit of some down here, and we have a big gap down here. This is from hurricanes. I believe this little breakout right here was a late season. Yeah. December of 2024. I believe this was this was a late season outbreak, which makes sense traditionally because you're not really going to have the moisture and instability up here in Nebraska and Kansas and Oklahoma when you're in December. But a lot of traditional Tornado Alley was back last year. And then so far this year, we're going to zoom back out, we're a little bit more east again, mostly directly here in Kentucky, Arkansas, Missouri, a lot in this area right here. We have a little bit in Kansas, a couple in Nebraska, a couple in Oklahoma, a couple in Texas, but it's really sitting right here in the south. Now, the United States has multiple tornado alleys. There's traditional Tornado Alley, which is this one right here in the middle of the country. We have Hoosier Alley, as I like to call it, a lot of people like to call it, which is Indiana, Illinois, Ohio. There's traditionally called Dixie Alley. I like to call Waffle House Alley. Down here in the south, it's Tennessee, Kentucky, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, this area right here. And then we have a Carolina Alley over in this area. And then occasionally there will be like a New England Alley up here that's included that has a couple like small EF0, EF1 tornadoes. And then there's every once in like a Florida Alley, which is usually caused by hurricanes. But you can see where the change in tornadoes are year to year, right? Oops. Well, I closed 2023 on accident. But you can see how it shifts. It just kind of shifts year to year, and it's going to continue to do that. It's not a Tornado Alley isn't shifting east. It's a where are they this year, right? Like we could pull up, let's do 2022. We had a lot down here in Texas and Oklahoma. We had some up here in Iowa and EF4 straight through the south portion of Des Moines. Not very many in Nebraska, some in Kansas, mostly down here in the southern portion of Tornado Alley, and then the south, 2022. We'll do 2021 as well. We've got more in Tornado Alley. We have these two big violent ones in Kentucky and Arkansas and Tennessee. This was the December 10th tornado outbreak. And then we had one violent one down here near Atlanta. This was March 25th. A little bit more spread out. So it just depends year to year. There's no real shift. It's just one of those things where it just depends on the year and how the setups are. It's not a hard and fast rule. It's not really shifting east. It's just there are different tornado alleys in the United States, and different ones are going to be more active year to year, basically. So that is our video on tornado myths. If you have any other tornado myths you've heard in your life, put them in the comments, and I will talk about them, and I can make a video about them. If you have any others or any suggestions or questions, let me know. If you enjoyed it, like, subscribe, all of those good things. I appreciate you all. As always, stay safe, and remember to check your smoke detector batteries.